Boom, boom, boom! At 3:07 a.m., the door nearly came off the hinges. I jolted awake, heart pounding. My dad was already up, standing at the stairs, barefoot, eyes sharp, pump-action shotgun cocked. "You boys better pray you're real law," he growled. What the hell was going on? And why did these so-called HOA cops have zip ties and body armor at my house? It started 2 days before the 3 a.m. ambush. A plain white envelope was sitting on the welcome mat. No postage, no return address, just the words, "Final Notice." HOA security compliance typed in bold across the top. The font looked cheap, almost like it was printed in a rush. Inside was a single sheet of paper, listing vague infractions: unauthorized backyard storage, suspicious nocturnal activity, and non-compliant landscaping. There was even a threat. Failure to comply would result in escalated intervention by the HOA security force. But here's the thing. We never signed up for any HOA security service. Ever. Our HOA had always outsourced to a third-party company, and their notices came officially through the mail. Sealed, stamped, logged. This felt like something cooked up in a basement with a cheap printer and a bad attitude. My dad, 72, with a back held together by titanium and a brain sharper than most 30-year-olds, held the letter up to the light like it was a puzzle. He didn't say much at first, just stared at it, then muttered, "This isn't regulation. Nothing about this is standard protocol." The way he said it gave me chills. He wasn't talking like a homeowner. He was thinking tactically, the way I imagine he did back in his SEAL days when intel didn't add up. That night, we installed the trail cams he keeps just in case, facing the road, the driveway, and the back fence. He also double-checked the alarm system, even cleaned the dust off the motion sensors. I laughed, half joking that he was overreacting to a prank letter, but he wasn't laughing. The next morning, we reviewed the footage. At 1:13 a.m., a dark SUV drove slowly past our house, lights off, engine barely audible. It paused at our driveway for 10 seconds, then continued down the street. No plates, no decals. The figure in the front seat wore a baseball cap pulled low, head slightly turned toward our house. We caught just a flash of their face. It didn't look like anyone from the neighborhood. We let it go, thinking it might have been a lost delivery driver or some drunk teenager messing around. But the next night, it happened again. Same SUV, same slow crawl, same pause. This time, it came around twice, once at 12:47, again at 2:05. My dad watched the screen in silence, jaw tight, eyes narrowing. The HOA office was closed on Sundays, so I called first thing Monday morning. They put me on hold, then transferred me to someone who sounded barely old enough to drive. I asked if the HOA had started a new security enforcement policy. She said no. Asked about the final compliance notice. She said she'd never heard of it. When I mentioned the SUV, her tone changed. She suddenly got nervous, said she'd escalate it to the board and get back to me. She didn't. I called again. Voicemail. Something wasn't right. None of it made sense. If the HOA wasn't behind the letter, who was? That's when our neighbor across the street, Larry, retired teacher, always walking his dog before sunrise, knocked on our door. He looked unsettled. Said he'd seen a man in a dark jacket standing near our mailbox around 3 a.m. that morning. Just standing there, not delivering anything, not leaving, just watching the house. When he tried to wave, the guy turned and walked off, disappeared between houses without a word. Larry leaned in and said, "Listen, I shouldn't even be saying this, but I overheard something weird last week. HOA had a private meeting, closed door, board only. My niece works the admin desk. Said they brought in these outside guys, not local police. Some kind of enforcement team, private, no uniforms, no IDs. I asked him what kind of team. He hesitated, then whispered, "Not legit. Heard they're ex-cons. Fake badges, tactical gear, hired muscle." His voice dropped to a near whisper. You didn't hear that from me. By that point, the tension in our house was thick. Every creak in the floorboards felt like a warning. My dad stopped sleeping more than 2 hours at a time, started keeping his service weapon nearby again, just in case. I asked him if he thought we were in real danger. He didn't answer. He just said, "They're testing us, probing for weakness. Whoever's behind this, they're coming." And just like that, the air shifted. We weren't just dealing with some HOA mix-up or power-tripping board. This wasn't about code violations or lawn height. This was targeted, personal, and it was building toward something no one would be ready for. The first sound was the screech of tires, not loud enough to wake the neighborhood, but sharp, intentional, followed by slamming doors, then boots, multiple pairs, quick, coordinated, crunching through gravel and leaves. Within seconds, the banging started. Fists pounding on the front door, not like someone knocking, but like they were trying to break it down. "HO compliance. Check. Open the door." The voice was deep, amplified, almost theatrical. Then another. "Step outside now, or we will enter with force under HOA Ordinance 76B. There is no Ordinance 76B. My dad knew that. I knew that. No HOA has the authority to kick in doors at 3 a.m., not even close. The hallway light was already off. My dad stood completely still at the top of the stairs, holding his old pump action like it was part of him. Not threatening, just ready. There was no panic, no shouting, just that terrifying calm that comes from someone who's lived through. Worse, and knows this moment doesn't call for fear, it calls for control. Another bang. This time, the sound of metal. Maybe a crowbar hitting the handle. I peeked through the blinds. A black van, no plates. 2 men out front in tactical vests with the letters HSU, not a known unit, stitched in cheap Velcro patches. One had a helmet. The other had what looked like a baton hanging from his belt. Behind them, a third guy was approaching the side of the house with a flashlight and a clipboard. They weren't police. They weren't even pretending to be police. Well, they were dressed like paramilitary cosplay gone wrong. "Sir, we are authorized to conduct a non-invasive search of the premises under HOA emergency protocols. If you do not comply, you will be subject to community-level enforcement." Dad didn't answer. Instead, he moved to the upstairs window, quietly unlatched it, then shoved it open. The sudden creak of old wood startled the men below. "You boys got 30 seconds to back away from my property. You're trespassing, and unless you can present a real badge and a real warrant, I'm treating this as an armed incursion." They looked up, one squinting through the porch light glare. The one with the helmet shouted back, "We've got jurisdiction under the HOA charter." My dad actually laughed. Just one cold, short laugh. "Not here, soldier. This is my grid." They hesitated. That's when the third man, clipboard guy, started walking toward the back gate. He barely got it open before motion lights triggered. Suddenly, the whole yard lit up like a football field. Every camera blinked to life, every angle caught. The guy froze mid-step, looked right at the nearest camera, backed up. The man on the porch raised his voice again, trying to sound official. "We're just here to inspect and verify code compliance. If you resist, you're in violation of community law." That's when my dad leaned just a little further. Out the window, pump action resting on the ledge. "You're about to be in violation of federal law if you don't get off my property." Dead silence. The men looked at each other. Then one of them lifted a walkie to his mouth and muttered something fast, unintelligible. The others began backing away, not running but moving fast. Strategic, trained. They knew they'd screwed up. Knew the bluff didn't land. They weren't. Expecting someone like my dad. Not someone who's seen real combat. Who's been dropped into jungles and deserts and cities where everything looks friendly until it isn't. They expected fear, confusion, maybe compliance. But they got a man who doesn't flinch when danger knocks. A man who doesn't bluff. The van peeled out before the streetlights could catch its plate. Just like that, they were gone. No damage to the door, No broken glass, just a lingering smell of rubber on the driveway and the unmistakable charge of adrenaline hanging in the air like smoke after gunfire. My dad didn't say anything right away, just slowly shut the window, then turned and walked down the stairs like it was just another Tuesday. No shaking hands, no fast breathing, just that same calm silence. I stood there watching him and realized something I'd never admitted out loud. He's not just my father. He's a weapon. Retired, maybe, but not disarmed, not deactivated, and for the first time I didn't just feel safer because he was home. I felt like the people outside should be grateful they made it out. Alive. The banging started again. Louder. This time angrier. No more fake commands, just brute force. A boot slamming into the front door again and again like they were trying to break it off the hinges. The wood cracked slightly with every hit. These guys weren't bluffing anymore. They were making a move. My dad didn't flinch. He raised 2 fingers, pointed at the wall switch, and mouthed one word: lights. I flipped the breakers we'd prepped earlier. Instantly, the house went black. Every bulb inside, off. Silence swallowed everything. Outside, though, it was the opposite. Motion sensors roared to life. Floodlights lit up the front yard like a prison yard during a breakout. Every camera snapped on. Red dots blinking. Every shadow now a spotlight. The thugs froze. But then one of them made the dumbest move of the night. He kicked again. Once, twice. The door held, but the sound echoed down the block like a starter pistol. My dad disappeared into the hallway shadows, his movement silent, ghost-like. Then came the whisper, razor quiet but direct. "Get your phone. Call the real cops. I'll hold the line." I dialed with shaking fingers. The 911 operator answered, but I barely spoke before I heard glass clink from the back of the house. Someone was on the roof, moving across the shingles. They thought they were being smart, flanking us. They didn't realize they were walking straight into a lesson in tactical consequences. There was a pause, a breath, and then, boom, a single. Warning shot tore through the air, fired not at the intruder but inches from his leg, close enough to let him feel the message in his bones. The guy screamed, lost his footing, and tumbled off the roof, crashing hard into the backyard shrubs. From the sound of it, he didn't land well. His partner in the yard scrambled toward him, shouting, "He's down! He's hit!" But he wasn't. Not even close. My dad didn't miss. He aimed where it would scare, not kill. It wasn't a firefight. It was control. Precision. Inside, the silence returned. Only now it was different. Charged. Even the walls felt like they were holding their breath. The front door didn't shake again. No more kicks. No more shouts. Just retreating footsteps and frantic voices arguing. They weren't prepared for resistance. They thought this would be another easy intimidation job. They thought wrong. From the kitchen. My dad stood at the window just watching. Calm. Hands steady. Breathing normal. You'd think he was watching birds in the backyard. But his eyes were hard. Measuring. Calculating. He tapped the window pane once, then looked at me and said quietly, "They're pulling out." I peeked out. The van doors slammed. The guy who fell off the roof was being dragged half limp into the back seat. They peeled away, tires skidding, engine howling like a wounded animal. Sirens echoed in the distance. Finally, blue and red lights flared at the end of the street, growing closer. I don't know if the fake enforcers saw them or just heard them coming, but they didn't wait around to find out. By the time the cops arrived, the van was gone. No license plate, no obvious identifiers, just black paint and a busted taillight. When the officers questioned us, my dad was respectful but firm, explained everything in sharp, clipped sentences. No rambling, no drama, just facts. When they asked about the gun, he simply said, "Fired one warning shot, no injuries. Intruder was climbing my roof. Cameras caught everything." They didn't argue. didn't even blink, because the truth was all around them. Damaged shrubs, shoe prints on the rooftop, shattered pieces of a walkie in the grass. And the fear still hanging in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. One officer, younger, maybe new to the job, looked at my dad with wide eyes and asked, "Sir, were you military?" My dad just nodded once. "Retired SEAL." The cop looked away, almost like he didn't want to admit how close this came to something worse. After they took statements, they promised to file a full report and escalate to county investigators. But we knew better. These guys didn't just disappear. They regroup, they plan, and they wait for a softer target. Only this house? It wasn't soft. And my dad? He just turned the game on its head. By the time the second wave of deputies rolled in, the neighborhood had woken up. Porch lights blinked on one by one. Curtains shifted. Cell phones recorded from windows. But no one came outside. Not yet. The memory of those black-clad enforcers lingered too heavy in the air. Even without gunfire, this felt like war. The fake HOA cops didn't get far. Their van didn't make it 3 blocks before a patrol SUV boxed them in at the next intersection. 2 of the goons bolted on foot. Bad move. One made it 6 houses before a deputy tackled him into a yard sprinkler. The other was caught in someone's backyard trying to scale a fence. He broke his ankle on the landing and screamed like a banshee. The driver, too slow to ditch the wheel, was hauled out at gunpoint, face shoved into the pavement. At first, they claimed it was all a misunderstanding, a compliance check gone wrong. They had authorization from the HOA board. One of them even tried to flash a laminated ID card that looked like it came from a gas station laminator. But when officers popped the trunk of the van, that narrative collapsed faster than a cheap lawn chair. Inside, zip ties, crowbars, lockpicks, printed HOA bylaws with pages marked and highlighted, especially ones about property violations and noise ordinances. There was even a list of homes with check marks next to some addresses. Ours? Circled twice in red marker. Another home down the street? Crossed out with "complied" scribbled next to it. That's when things started to unravel. Under interrogation, one of them cracked. Said they weren't real HOA cops because that role doesn't even exist. They were hired muscle, paid under the table to pressure select homeowners. How? By staging nighttime visits, creating fear, hinting at legal trouble, code violations, or worse. So homeowners would panic and sell. Cheap, fast. Turns out the plan wasn't just thuggery. It was real estate fraud dressed up in a polo shirt and fake jurisdiction. The bigger twist? These guys had rap sheets. One had done time for armed robbery. Another was a disgraced repo man with assault charges. They were brought in by someone, higher up. Someone who promised they'd never be caught. Someone with connections. And that someone was sitting in the HOA boardroom. We weren't just random targets. Our house sat on prime lakefront property, undeveloped, a view to die, for, literally, apparently, and the board had been pushing us to sell for months. First came the letters about non-compliance, then fines for made-up landscaping rules, then accusations of violations we'd already cleared. When none of that worked, they escalated. They sent in wolves. The motive? A development plan. A private marina, accessible only by board-approved lots. 5 homes stood in their way. Ours was one. And out of those 5, 3 had recently sold, suspiciously under market value, to a limited liability company with 0 online footprint. You ever smell something rotten under fresh paint? That was this. Detectives pulled HOA meeting records, subpoenaed emails, and flagged the cell tower data of the arrested men. The link connected back to one name, a man who had just moved into the neighborhood 3 months ago, a guy who came, in smiling, shaking hands, running for HOA president almost the moment he unpacked a box. Claimed he just wanted to improve things. Improvement, it seemed, meant wiping 5 families off the street and replacing them with boat slips. When now they brought him in, he didn't deny it. Just sat there smug, asking for a lawyer and muttering something about business opportunities. No remorse. Just calculation. But what he didn't expect, what none of them expected, was my dad. Not just the weapon, the watchman, the line in the sand, but the man who had recorded everything, logged every incident, documented every letter, every visit, every shady encounter with timestamps and video files in chronological folders. He didn't react out of paranoia. He prepared out of instinct. It's what kept him alive overseas, and what dismantled this entire operation here, in the land of picket fences and dog poop fines. That morning, as detectives packed up the last of the evidence bags and the HOA board sat in stunned silence, my dad poured himself a black coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the sun rise like it was any other day. "Good plan," he said, taking a sip. "Poor execution." And just like that, the facade of a peaceful neighborhood crumbled, because it wasn't just about a few bad apples. It was a network, greed wearing khakis. And they picked the wrong house. The house was quiet now, but our living room looked like an intelligence outpost. My dad had turned it into a war room, laptop open, drive cloning in progress, video files queued up. Every frame of our home security footage had already been backed up twice. The audio recordings, synced with timestamps, the fake badge one of the guys dropped during the struggle, vacuum sealed in a clear evidence bag. The man wasn't just a soldier, he was a systems guy. Everything labeled, logged, lined up, and most importantly, admissible. He didn't just want revenge, he wanted them indicted. We sat down with a federal investigator 2 days later, and when we laid it all out, the assault, the impersonation, the property extortion attempt, they didn't just listen. They leaned forward. Turns out, impersonating law enforcement officers to enforce fraudulent HOA rules isn't just sketchy, it's a federal crime. And when you do it while breaking into someone's property with weapons, you just triggered a RICO case. They launched a task force that week. The story blew up. Local news ran with it first, then national media caught on. Headlines like, "Fake HOA Police Terrorize Neighborhood, Retired SEAL Turns the Tables." "Home Invasion Scheme Linked to HOA Board, Veteran Family Fights Back." Within 48 hours, we had satellite trucks parked outside our fence line. I had to give a statement in front of a dozen microphones. Cameras panned over our bulletproof floodlights and yard signs now reading, "We don't call HOA, we call 911. The HOA president, who had smiled through every board meeting, pretended to care about landscaping and community harmony, was suddenly a ghost. No press statements. No lawyer visits to the house. Just silence. Until the silence ended. Loudly. 2 weeks later, in the middle of a Thursday morning board meeting, federal agents raided the HOA office. Full tactical vests, warrants, in hand. They didn't knock. 8 people arrested on the spot. 2 were lawyers on the board, one of them linked to shell companies that bought up those complied properties. Turns out the whole thing was a laundering operation. Buy homes at gunpoint prices, rezone the land, flip it for a waterfront. Development scheme disguised as community improvement. The HOA's general counsel tried to claim it was a rogue faction, a few bad actors, but the digital trail said otherwise. Email chains, internal memos, HOA meeting transcripts where expedited compliance was literally a bullet point. They'd been doing this for nearly a year. We were just the first ones who didn't fold. Court orders froze HOA bank accounts. The development permits were pulled. And every homeowner forced to sell under duress got their property back, plus damages. It wasn't just justice. It was absolute detonation. A judge reviewed our case and, given the nature of the crimes, ruled that our property, along with the 4 other targeted homes, would be permanently exempt from any future HOA jurisdiction. Not just this HOA, any HOA, ever. I watched the hearing from the back row. My dad didn't even react when the judge said it. He just sat with his arms crossed, face unreadable, like he was still calculating what angle the enemy might take next. But after the gavel dropped, I caught the smallest crack of a smile. Barely visible. But it was there. One of the reporters asked my dad how he managed to stay so calm through it all. He said, "You never panic in the middle of a breach. You prepare before it happens. That's the difference between surviving and winning." The media ate it up. Later that week, I walked through the neighborhood for the first time since it all happened. No more side eyes, no more whispers. People waved, thanked us. One older couple even offered us a pie. Funny how fast fear turns to respect when the masks come off. The HOA was dissolved officially 2 months later. No replacement. The city took over basic enforcement, trash days and zoning stuff. But no, more surprise inspections. No more power trips over mailbox colors. Just neighbors. Quiet again. But the story didn't just end there. We were contacted by a federal housing investigator. Apparently, our case had exposed a pattern. Similar operations, shady boards, shell LLCs, fake violations, were popping up in other states. Texas, Arizona, Florida. Looks like we weren't the only ones. We were just the first to hit back and win. That's when it really hit me. They didn't come to our door because we were troublemakers. They came because we were quiet. A retired SEAL and his family, easy pickings, they thought. No loud parties, no legal threats. Just a soft target. But they made one fatal mistake. They came to our door at 3 a.m. thinking they were wolves, but they woke up a SEAL. And now, they're the ones locked behind doors. If this story lit a fire in you, if it made your blood boil, your jaw drop, or your heart race, then you need to subscribe for more. Because this is just one chapter in the insane world of HOA power trips, corrupt boards, and the people brave enough to fight back. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment about what you would have done, and share this with someone who still thinks HOA rules are harmless. This is the HOA stories, where the Karens get caught, the fake cops get cuffed, and justice always kicks down the door.